Namaskaram, I'm Abishek Chandrasekar. I'm a Carnatic music student. I have learned from various teachers in the past, Srimati Vijaya Srinivas, Sri Shertalai Shivakumar Ramachandran. Currently I'm under the tutelage of Vidwan Ramakrishnan Murthy. Besides my Carnatic music training, I have also trained in Bharatanatyam. I learnt under the Pandanallur Bani for 6 to 7 years, and after which I was also exposed to the Vaduvur style of Bharatanatyam. So a project like this is uniquely exciting to me because it melds the two worlds of Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam, classical music and dance, that so excite me. I think this perspective as a dually involved artist who is both interested in music and dance has helped me engage with such a project with a lot more depth, which is why I was very excited when Sriram approached me with this idea to present this rare piece called Netiki Dayavachena in Sahana. This particular piece has only existed in notation. We don't have any oral memory, any musical record of it being performed in music or dance stages. So when he said that this has to be reconstructed from notation, I think that added challenge was even more incentive for me to take this up. So this particular format of what we call the Swarajati is very interesting in itself because we know that this format originated somewhere in the early 18th century. The interesting thing is that what we today have as the Swarajati and what we today have as the Padavarnam have this common predecessor. They kind of germinated from the same source point and evolved into these different forms. So I believe this is where the Padavarnam as we have it today also originated from. Which came first, which came later, it all originated around the same time, so we can't say conclusively. But why this is interesting is because this particular Sahana piece stands at that point of intersection. I would find it very difficult to say whether this is a Swarajati or a Padavarnam because it combines aspects of both. When a format is in such a nascent stage, it tends to have characteristics of both which later bifurcate and evolve into their own beings, right? So that's kind of what has happened. So we very popularly know the Hussaini Swarajati, Emandaya Nara or Emayaladira, Pahimam Brihan Nayaki, multiple copies of that same mette. This kind of follows structurally the same format, but then also has characteristics of a Padavarna. So this is what places it at that kind of intersection point. And I think Swarajatis and Padavarnams occupy such a central position in the dance repertoire because of the richness of what they bring. For example, a Jati, which is used in dance, is just a rhythmic piece. A Jati Swaram is a combination of rhythm and melody. A Swarajati is a combination of rhythm, melody and poetry. So if we think of Bharatanatyam as combination of Bhava, Raga and Tala, all three are addressed by poetry, melody and rhythm through the Swarajati. So I think that's why the Swarajati and the very allied Padavarnam occupy this kind of central position in the dance repertoire, which is known for bringing out the emotional layers and the story narrative through such pieces. Additionally, this piece is also interesting because Like I said, the Hussaini Swarajati, pioneered by Melatur Veerabhadraya and later by Pachimiri Madhiyappaya and other composers, tends to follow a particular format of repeating that re, re, re. So this kind of a motif is common to all of them. Interestingly, this is, and there are multiple compositions in Hussaini in the same format. To my knowledge, Sahana, this particular work, seems to be the first one to break out of the ragam construct but retain that format. It still has that re. For example, the Pallavi of the song begins with Netiki re re re, and the Charanam also goes Ye mo nanumarachi re re. So that re motif is withheld, or the re motif is continued, and but the ragam, beyond being just in Hussaini as the earlier compositions have been, this one comes to Sahana. So I think that's the common point of the re being such a strong swaram in both of these ragams is manipulated to create a new musical avenue, and there are so many compositions that follow after this. Subramanya Dikshithar has tuned a Kamas piece in the same format. So I think this Sahana work is seminal in that aspect of bringing this format, this idea, into new ragams and expanding its scope. Coming to the lyrical quality of this particular Padavarnam / Swarajati, it's very interesting because unlike most other dance pieces that normally talk about a deity or talk about a monarch or a zamindar or some sort of rich patron who's patronizing the artist, this particular composition is on the son of a nobleman called Mallarji. So when I first discussed this piece with Sriram, both of us were quite perplexed as to who it addresses, but as we discussed, as we did more research, we figured that this was on Mallarji, and this person, Mallarji, was the son of a nobleman called Dattaji. And more interestingly, the Hussaini Swarajatis, which we see as the quintessential Swarajatis today, one of its copies is actually dedicated to the same Mallarji. There the explicit mention is made of saying Dattajendruni Putrudau Mallarji Chandrasami is what the lyrics say. So this Mallarji is definitely not an alien Nayaka or a hero for dance compositions. More interestingly, in the Anupallavi of the song, I was very intrigued by the Nayaka saying Saati Leni Saami, the Mallarji who has no match, who has no rival. But why say this of a nobleman or the son of a nobleman who was himself not even a minister or part of the courtly activities? The next phrase in the Anupallavi is what struck me as the answer to this. So the line goes, Saati Leni Mallarjumeti Sarasa Kiriti. Sarasa Kiriti basically means, though you may not be the deity who has a crown of his own or the king who wears the crown, but you are the crowning king of my heart. My love knows only you as my king. I think this is very typical of Swarajatis and Padavarnams, where there is very little said explicitly on purpose because more of that space is offered for the dancer to fill in their imagination. So this line is very suggestive. It's just a phrase, but it opens up avenues of imagination that the dancer has to interpret then. So this is a very fundamental quality of such dance pieces that I think this work has done absolutely with brilliance. Sahana is very rich in its emotional expressive quality. I think there's a reason why across composers, some of the most emotional works are set in Sahana, be it Tyagaraja singing Giripai Nelakonna Ramuni, which is one of his most heart-wrenching works that he sings towards the end of his life, or Dikshithar, who's normally has a very impersonal, unemotional distance. When he composes in Sahana, he says, Kamalambikaya Bhaktim Karomi, give me devotion towards you. So this kind of very heart-melting sometimes wistful quality is also why it's used in many padams, Mogodochi or Iniyenna Pechu, Chudare, Moratopu. All of these are set in Sahana because I believe it offers that kind of a canvas of rich emotional depth. Coming to this particular piece, Sahana is brought out with a lot of wistful quality is what I feel, because the Nayaka says, oh, you have finally come. She's in that state of overwhelmed rapture. And I found it also interesting that this is not the typical Varnam Nayaka, right? You have so many Varnams that if you see from the Natya Shastra lens, you have the Virahot Kantita, the most commonly used Nayaka. You have the Vipralabdha or the Abhisarika, Swadhina Patika. This Nayaka doesn't neatly fit into any of these tropes, right? In this composition, the Nayaka, in the very beginning, sees her Lord before her. It's not that she's pining for her Lord who is separated from her. The song begins with, oh, you're finally here. And then the rest of the song talks about her feeling of finally seeing her Lord after such a long separation, saying that, is it only now that you have remembered to come to me? It's not direct happiness, it's not overjoyed, not jumping about kind of happiness, but this very disbelief kind of happiness that has so many layers and textures to it which makes it perfect for dance is what this Varnam is. So when we try to revive this in performance, we found that we didn't want to force fit contemporary ideas of Sahana onto this because it has phrases that don't fit into our very common understanding of Sahana. So, for example, there are phrases in the Swarams like ni ri ri pa ma da da ni ri sa, that kind of skipping notes, or sa ni da ma da ni sa, or one of my favorites, sa ni da ma da ni sa ri ga ma da ma ga ri ni ye mo. Sari, that kind of a jump, almost a whole octave, and riga mada magarini yemo is very atypical of what we think of Sahana today, right? So that was the cue for us to imagine that, okay, this is not the Sahana you'll hear at any common concert, so we need to give this special attention, which is when we started looking at texts and seeing what Sahana might have been back in the day, and we also started listening to recordings of Sahana. We realized that something that we already knew at the back of our minds was what we had to apply here, which is that Sahana has a lot of phrases that are not in common currency today, but also just the handling of the notes. The most significant example being how the Swaram Gandharam is held, the Ga is held. If you see the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini, the Sahana Ragam is recorded under the 20th second Melam. So it doesn't have the Gandharam that we use today predominantly. So the Antara Gandharam is not used, the Sadharana Gandharam used, the lower quality of Ga. And the Antara Gandharam appears in certain phrases. So this might sound like a very minor technical point, but it actually entirely changes the tenor of the Ragam. So there are phrases, I'll just demonstrate a few phrases where we apply the different Gamakam for Ga. So phrases like, for example, Pamaga, Pamaga, Gari, Sani would have been the common Gamakam. We have rendered it as Pamaga, Gari, Sani, Sa, Pamaga, Gari, Sa, Ni, Da, Pamaga, Gari, Sa. If you listen to GNB recordings, Ramnath Krishnan recordings, you will see that they have handled even Tyagaraja compositions with this kind of lowered Ga. So I think over time, as ragas evolve, as has happened with Saveri and so many other ragams, we have changed how we handle certain notes and given them new color. But considering that this piece belongs to an era bygone, we thought that it makes most sense to apply this older understanding. And of course, we had to balance the modern and the old, because interpreting from notation is not a process of reading notation. Reconstruction means there will always be a touch of the interpreter in what is being interpreted, because just reading the notes is not how reconstruction is done. My reconstruction of this piece would be very different from another artist's, but my guiding principle for doing this was that it should not be the template thing that I am used to just because it's easy and current. It should also be not something completely irrelevant from a time bygone that we're not able to appreciate it today. So kind of balancing its aesthetic quality with its textual roots is what I've tried to bring for this composition. And I must mention in this regard my close friend Tarun, who helped me reconstruct this piece, because he was the one who suggested that we handle the Gandharam differently according to the older idea, and that's what has contributed so significantly to the piece shaping up as it has today. So I had a really great time engaging with this piece because I was able to appreciate two distinct layers that are so intrinsically connected to each other, which is the dance element of this work and the music element of this work, right? So the composers themselves, so this is by Ponnaya, who was one of the brothers of the Tanjavur Nalvar or the Tanjavur Quartet. They themselves stood at this intersection of music and dance, and of course they lived at a time when these were not seen as separate disciplines. Like musicians were trained dancers, dancers had training in music and so on. So the quartet themselves are responsible for the codification of dance in the Margam pedagogy or format that we see today, and they were trained by the great legendary Muthuswami Dikshitar, who is someone who has shaped the practice of Carnatic music as we know it today. As a singer, I'm able to sing better because I understand dance and have been trained in dance. As a dancer, I'm able to express better because I understand music, and because I'm somewhat adept in dance and music, I'm able to compose better because they are coming together, an amalgamation of both of these aspects. I think it is part of that DNA of art to see these not as separate disciplines but as one unit in how they come together. And I'm someone who strongly believes that all dancers today will greatly be benefited from training in music, considering that music is the foundation on which their movement is built. And the greats like Balama and such have given more attention to fixing the music for their performances because they felt that the dance would be an organic extension of that. Even if we are able to appreciate and understand music at a deeper level, I strongly believe that it will reflect on how a dancer dances. This particular project, Varnajalam, is something that I'm really looking forward to because I think it's a fantastic initiative from the team of Vak and Sri Ram Shankar to bring forward these compositions, these Varnams that are such masterpieces, and especially in this case something that has not even been heard before. To bring them back to life, we need initiatives like this where we reconstruct art history, and I think it's not just cultural history. If we look at these patrons, especially in this case Mallarji, we see what kind of role he played in the political administrative context. I was able to learn a lot more about that period in history from researching for this piece. So I think it cultivates more of an interest in our shared heritage, our culture, our history, by giving importance to such attempts at reviving our forgotten treasures, musical, artistic, and in any other regard. So I think this is why Varnajalam is so special to me, and I really hope that you will all join us for this festival happening on June 27th and 28th. This particular Sahana piece will be given on 28th, which is a Sunday at 6:30 p.m, where we'll be performing this as a music and dance presentation. So the tickets for this are available on Kin. So hope to see you all in large numbers there, and looking forward to the event.
Swarajati